lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today, I have a very dope indie cartoonist, Tony Wolf. We are going to be talking his new book that he just dropped with Cosmic Lion Productions, friend of the channel, Eli Schwab. Everything Cosmic Lion puts out is dope, and this is just yet another dope book. So I'm so glad we can have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Eli was so amazing to work with, and he did a beautiful job with this. So it's a collected paperback of a bunch of short stories, 220 pages. I'm so happy to have a spine because for so many years, all I did was web comics.
It's awesome.
Or mini comics.
It's all over the place. The types of stories that you'll get in here, but it says on the cover, it's a memoir. It's stuff. It's slice of life. It's stuff from your own experiences. I really dug it. I love that. I mean, there's such varying stories in here that I could do little videos on each one if I wanted to. I really dug what you did here, and it spans from I think it's the late 90s. Is that the early or the oldest story in here? I feel right.
Yeah. So as far as stories, there is a story that I did in the late 90s. I think right before the Y2K, like in 99. That's a sci-fi kind of one-off short story that my friend. I wrote most everything in the book, but there's 3 sections that other writers wrote.
Yeah, you're talking about this one. This is the sci-fi one you're talking about, right, Jenny?
Yeah.
Everett?
So are you a Grant Morrison fan?
Yeah. I know I paused for a second. I love Grant Morrison. It's just sometimes I feel like I've said this before. Like, am I an idiot because I'm not understanding what he's trying to do, or is he just thinking on another level that nobody else is even thinking on? But I do. I love his work. My introduction to him was not through maybe other people's first stuff. It was JLA when I was in middle school.
Oh, it's funny. Grant Morrison, it's almost like Grant Morrison goes in. I'm a huge fan of Grant Morrison, but I think it's like 1/3 of his output is like JLA, meaning it's very accessible, right? Mm-hmm. It's like JLA is like the popcorn action film of Grant Morrison. Very rarely does JLA get really weird and out there, and I think JLA is perfect. Then there's a middle 1/3 of Grant Morrison, which is like half David Lynch, half comic books, which it gets pretty weird. And some of that is digestible, and some of it is a little, you kind of have to be into David Lynch weird stuff. And then there's 1/3 that's super out there, super off the wall. And even though I'm a mega fan, I think there's 2 books that I even found a little bit almost incomprehensible. And that was Nameless, which was an Image book that Chris Burnham drew.
Right.
And there was something he did called Annihilator.
Oh, was that the one with Fraser Irving? Yeah.
Fraser Irving drew that. And I was like, I see what he's doing, but it just was a little bit gobbledygook, some of it to me. Nameless also. The Invisibles, I feel is that good middle, mostly sweet spot. I mean, it was a sweet spot for me, but almost like Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks, a little more mainstream than Twin Peaks, but still definitely out there.
Yeah, see, I've tried to read it twice. First time I read it, I was a few years ago. So I had already been reading comics for a long time. I mean, I'm going to be 36 in a couple of weeks, and I've been getting comics since I was 5. So comics have been a huge part of my life. I've never really taken a break from it unless, like I mentioned in the past, there were some years in my youth where I was doing some dumb stuff and I wasn't able to read comics because of where I was. Sure. Right. But
a lot of people drop out for various reasons, they kind of fall out of comics.
I just loved comics. It's my favorite medium, and so I tried reading Invisibles, and I think part of me powered through it, where I was literally just reading the words, but I wasn't really absorbing it. And then I tried to read it again a few months back because my brother had the 4 books, and he's like, I don't get this. And I was like, well, give it to me. I'll give it another go, and I feel like it would benefit if I read it an issue at a time. It's
not in trades,
not just trying to get through it, not reading an entire book and that's all I'm reading. I feel like maybe I need to let the work breathe. That's going to be my third read, is when I just read an issue, maybe an issue a day, or maybe an issue
Right.
every other day, because I
Yeah.
do feel like, I mean, it's so celebrated, you know. So I feel like
Yeah.
I need to get it, or I'm gonna be upset with myself as a fan.
But
You know?
I feel like it's definitely a certain taste. It's almost like I don't love every David Lynch movie, but certain David Lynch things I really
Mhm.
like Twin Peaks or most of Twin Peaks. But the reason I mentioned Grant Morrison is so in the late 90s when Invisibles was still being printed, it was still fresh on the racks. Because everyone like, a lot of one of the things in the Invisibles is like, what's going to happen in the year 2000? Is it going to be Y2K? Is it going to be a cosmic reordering of society, which would
Mhm.
have been cool, but did not really happen. Um, but I was on a message board back in the early days of message boards for comics.
Mhm.
Um, that was inspired by the Invisibles. It was a Grant Morrison inspired message board called Barbalith, because
Okay.
Barbalith is one of the things. And there was a whole community of comics creators and fans, of course, mostly fans that were on Barbalith. And I met the writer of this short story through there. Um, and they began to like make up their own characters. And someone made up a character that they called an open source character, like computer programming open source language. So
Yeah.
this is a copyright free character that anyone can do whatever they want with forever. And it's kind of like a female Doctor Who type, like
Yeah.
she hops dimensions and you can kind of tell any kind of story you want, much like with Doctor Who. You can kind of do any genre. So this story was written and drawn in like 98, 99. But I really started doing comics in earnest with these short stories in the late 90s about Brooklyn, about Greenpoint, when I moved to Greenpoint next to Williamsburg at, right before 2000, kind of when Williamsburg was starting to blow up and the word hipster like entered the lexicon, the word
Yeah.
hipster emerged. And I was too nerdy to really be a hipster, although maybe hipsters are nerdy. I don't know, but I didn't feel I was cool enough to be a hipster. But um, I was very influenced by obviously Harvey P. Carr and
Okay.
Dean Haspiel, who I knew in the Brooklyn like comics community. And he had a series of books called Street Code, which he later collected in a book called Street Code. And they were all
Okay.
short autobiographical stories about his life in Brooklyn. Um, so I was like, I'm going to make a go of this. I'm really going to start making comics. I drew a ton as a kid and I made a lot of my own comics in high school and college, but I didn't really put them out there.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I have everything. Yeah, I have
I
all of
kind
them.
of I kind of want to see that. If you could take pictures and send them to me, I won't share them.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I always like, for me, like I've talked to a lot of creators. Obviously, like if you look at
right.
my catalog, and I've
Yes.
some creators will be like, I don't want to show people that. I'm like, yeah, but that's cool though. Like there's
Yeah.
something exciting about that, about like when somebody's like first starting to do it and they're doing it not for anything other than themselves and
Right.
for the
Right.
love of it, you know, and then
Yeah.
to just watch the progression. I don't know. I'd kind of dig seeing those. So
Well, in my teenage years, I really was intent. I was like, I'm going to draw for Marvel and DC. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm also an actor. And I was like, I love the acting and I sing and I love the singing. But I was like, no, 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 I'm going to be an artist. So I didn't work as hard as I know a lot of illustrators did in their teenage years, but I worked unusually hard. Like, I wasn't like living at home doing nothing but drawing. I wanted to make sure I had a social life and. But in college, I kind of like fell out of love with the idea of trying to be a professional comics illustrator just because I knew that the only way to get art done was to like stay at home and not see other human beings, really.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I'm a little too social for this. Like, I love being alone drawing, but I don't want to be alone and draw like for most of my life. So, and acting is with other human beings. You're in a TV show or you're in a play,
Mhm.
you get to be creative with other humans in the room. Um, anyway, so I just kind of I got out of drawing for a while in my 20s and 30s. And then in my 40s, I was like, I turned 40 and I had gotten some acting stuff over the years and done okay, but not all that much. And I was like, maybe I should get back to comics. Maybe I should like give it a go. But I also, even at that point, I was like, I'm not saying I'm going to do Marvel and DC, but I should at least start making my own indie comics. And so I started doing web comics, and right out of the gate, New York Magazine did a blurb on one of my web comics about Brooklyn, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's like a sign that, I was going to keep doing them even if no one gave a shit, to be quite honest. But
Yeah.
the fact that someone in like a real magazine in the Manhattan area like noticed, and but I put a lot of work into try. I know it's all autobiographical slice of life, but I've read all comics my entire life. I've read superhero since I was 12. I've read every genre. I've read so much stuff, and I've also read a lot of autobio. And so I tried really hard while I was doing these to be an editor on myself. I was like, look, I've already read 8,000 stories about like my dating life. I need a girlfriend, and I was like, I've read better ones, like better creators than me in that topic. Like, I don't have hilarious dating stories. I wish I did, or otherwise I would have done them. But I was like, I've already read so many comics that were like, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I was like, I have all those things. I'm depressed, I have anxiety too, but I don't have a new thing to say that should be a comic. Like, I
Mhm.
read all the Jeffrey Browns, and I mean, so many comics. So every time I did a short story for this book, I really tried to do something in the short story where I hadn't seen this topic done before, even if it was a subtle, esoteric kind of topic. And then eventually I started doing comics about my favorite ice cream, and that got me into the New York Times. So that was like a pleasant
I
shock
like
as
that.
well.
It was a shock to me when I flipped the page and
Okay.
saw it. I was like,
You
this
think
is
all you're gonna
interesting.
get is
I
like
was
some
like,
dude in Brooklyn.
this is interesting. I'm like, I wouldn't have thought to do this because, like, I'll be honest with you. We're not here to talk about me, but this book made me want to kind of force myself to learn how to draw so that I could do, because I'm like, you know what the fuck do I have to say? Like, I want to
Right.
create comics. I can't draw for
Or
shit.
by the way, quick sidebar, you could
Yeah.
also write something and someone could draw it. Like I could draw it, or so
Yeah.
many artists. You could write like I just because I'm always encouraging people to make their own stuff. Like, even if you don't teach yourself to draw in the next year or whatever, you could write something. So many amazing artists.
Yeah.
Call up. And the other thing that I say in the introduction of the book, a short story is, I don't want to say it's easy, but a short story is very manageable to complete.
That is
Right.
what every single writer I have ever asked. What I'm
Yep.
like, because I used to ask that mostly when I was just doing the written interviews, like a piece of advice, and it's always like,
Right.
start with a short story. Do not try
Start
to
with
write
short
a
stories.
don't try to write a full issue, a mini series, a graphic novel. Don't try to do that.
Right.
Just do three, 4 page story, and then
Yes.
go from there. And like that's like you said, it's more manageable. But like that's what I loved
So
about this.
if this book inspired you to start brainstorming short stories, great. Like that's a goal.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what it did. I
And
mean,
the
I like the 1-800 Dead Robin. I loved that story. I really dug it.
thank you.
Like I obviously was not old enough. I mean, I was alive, but I was not old enough to have
Right.
done that voting thing. But like, I can only imagine as a fan if they did it now. If they're like,
Right.
do you want to kill
Yeah. Yeah.
Damien? Should Damien live or die? I might think
Yeah.
about it. I'm like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
maybe he should fucking die. Like, I don't know. But like, I loved
Right.
how you kind of wrote about that. I thought it was a cool little anecdote into your
Thank you.
into you as a fan and relating it into like the history of something historical that happened in comics, because that was the first and only time I can think of that happened, right? Something like that of
Oh
that
yeah.
magnitude.
One of the things I say in the story is they've also never really done it since.
Yeah.
Like Top Cow had that thing called pilot season where they would do first issues, and fans vote as to what gets a full miniseries.
Oh right, yeah.
And people they write into letter columns, and now it's they write on Twitter. Like, the companies take in feedback, but I don't think they've ever done well. When Marvel versus DC did that thing with Access, do you remember All Access? I mean, this is also the 90s. You might not have been old enough, but
No,
they did have
I
a thing where it was like Batman versus some Marvel, like Batman versus Captain America, who should win?
okay,
This
yeah, I remember the comic. I don't remember
Right.
that aspect of it. I was probably
They
too
did
young.
have a thing where it's like, and what they meant was who should win the little scene within the miniseries where they fight, sort of. But I don't know that they actually always abided by those vote tallies. But
Yeah.
to me, it was fascinating as a kid because I was a teenager and I was like, this is a conduit to a good story, maybe. But at the same time, I was like, isn't it like morbid that we're like voting to kill a young teenager character? Like,
Yeah.
and
It's
so I
dark.
wanted to, it's dark. And it's also like, it's kind of like Gladiator, like thumbs up, thumbs down in the arena. The lion should eat the kid or the lion should not eat the kid.
Yeah.
And I just thought one of my goals, kind of what's kind of become a little bit emblematic of some of my style as I've done all these short stories, is I always, and that's kind of, I think, what helped me get to do so many things for the New York Times. It's like half autobio, but half history. So I
Yeah.
kind of take you through my train of thought, but I also wanted to almost feel like journalism a little bit, where I fit in a lot of facts and cultural trends that inform the one fan's perspective that I'm giving you, the reader. So half of that story is what went through my head, and the other half is taking you through the trends in the industry at the time and why it was significant and the way people have talked about it since. There was a comic many years ago, like a weird indie thing, where it was very small press, and it was comics about being a comics fan. And I don't remember much about it. I don't think I have it anymore. It was very super small press. Mark Waid, I think, wrote a short 4-page story that someone else drew, and Bendis wrote a 3 or 4-page story that someone else drew. And Bendis's was like about, I mean, it's a story he tells intermittently about he ate too much he ate too many chocolate puddings and his poop turned out green or something. It was just a funny, embarrassing story from his childhood. But I remember reading that, and that stuck in my head for years. I was like, because I did all these stories about Brooklyn, like, what it was like living in Brooklyn, anecdotes from my neighborhood. Because Williamsburg was so big and I was right next door to Williamsburg, and I thought I could kind of ride that buzz, which I did a little bit. People would keep coming up to me going, you can be Greenpoint guy. You live in Greenpoint. You're the Greenpoint cartoonist. And I was like, that's cool to be known for anything, but I don't just want to be Greenpoint guy. Like it was a little too, like, I don't know, limiting. I was like, I need to start forcing myself to do other stories that have nothing to do with Little Slice of Life in Greenpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that comic. I should Google and see what the hell it was, but it was like funny autobio anecdotes from professional big time writers. I always kind of thought at the time they were blogs, like very obscure comic blogs about the death of Robin and the phone vote. I was like, I've never seen like an essay about it that I really think encompasses everything. And wouldn't it be cool if I could do a comic that was an essay, but in comic form, kind of? And so that was how I did that. And then I realized, oh, I could do other ones. Like there's a story about Alpha Flight in the
Oh
book
yeah,
as
I was
well.
gonna ask you about that too. Yeah. I hear about people talking about like how big Alpha Flight was, but by the time
Yeah.
I was like old enough to kind of like really pay attention to writers and all that stuff, Alpha Flight had been long gone. That's
Yes.
first
Yeah.
off. Second of all, like I'm
Yeah.
like a Canadian, why? Like, and then as
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
older, I'm like, wait, it was like one of their best sellers for a while, like because John Byrne had long been gone from Marvel
Right.
when I started like really collecting stuff. I think
Yeah.
he maybe had at the time was doing Wonder Woman at DC. So
Yeah. Which
he's
wasn't even that great. Yeah.
no, so like and then I
I'm, I'm
hear all
a
this
I'm a fan of Byrne, but yeah, Wonder Woman was like so.
right. So like I'm like, why do people like this guy? Like I didn't really care
Yeah.
for him, and then I've got obviously I go back and I'm like, okay, yes, I can appreciate his stuff. Like I've read his
Right.
She-Hulk, which I dig, his X-Men stuff, obviously, like
Right.
maybe the writing is a little bit unreadable
Right. Well, that's
nowadays. Like,
Claremont. Yeah.
yeah, but that's not him, it's not Burns' fault. But
Yeah.
anyways, so
And his
like
Fantastic Four is still entertaining if you were to read it
I
now.
haven't read
It's
all of
still
it. Yeah, I'd like to,
it's
but
beautifully drawn, and it's for the most part very well written.
yeah.
Obviously a little bit dated for its time, but still.
Yeah, but that's
But
what
at
I
the
dug
time,
about your Alpha Flight story, because like you gave a little bit of history too about stuff I still don't even know. So
yeah.
that was another cool anecdote, man.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, with these comics, sort of comics about comic stories, which I came to call Tony's True Tales of Comics. The idea was, yeah, to kind of take you through my mind at the time, and then also to give some history. But yeah, at the time, Alpha Flight was huge because it was Byrne, and Byrne was like Martin Scorsese at the time. I mean, it was like Frank Miller, John Byrne, Walt Simonson. There were like three or I can't trying to think of who else was that big at the time.
You said
Byrne,
Frank Miller,
Miller,
right? Yeah.
Simonson, yes.
I feel like those
But
are
they
the
were
big three.
like superstars, mega stars. Like
And they were
the way,
writing and drawing. They were like doing it
yes, they were
all.
all writer slash artists. Almost the way that, like, I'm trying to think, the way that like Greg Capullo is like revered now, or the way
Mhm.
that Greg Capullo was revered during his Batman run,
Yeah.
but almost even a little bigger than Capullo. Like, I don't know who Neil, almost like a Neil Gaiman level of like they're a superstar, and at the time in the 80s, anything they touched turned to gold. Anything they touched was really well for that time period of the 80s.
Yeah.
Everything they executed was at the top of their game. And then each of them, maybe, Simonson has never really lost his footing, but it can be argued and debated where they went. It's almost
Yeah.
like, I like that rock musician. I like the stuff in the 80s, but after that, it kind of became elevator music or whatever.
What I really took from the Burn thing was those quotes that she threw in the back. And I was like, my God. I like
Yeah.
each one I read got to me like progressively more offending. I was like,
Yeah.
and
Well,
like,
Burn is it's another classic case of like the endless debate of, can you separate art from artist, or can someone be a great screenwriter but then he was an asshole or a terrible person. And in the 80s, Byrne had a reputation for being cantankerous and a little egotistical, but it's like sometimes he would be super polite and sometimes he would be very arrogant and you weren't quite sure. But it seems like, many decades later, he just became almost like more and more of a curmudgeonly old man, more
bitter.
conservative, more digging in, and more like just going on rants and never afraid to offend any number of people or ethnic groups. Or so it's a weird, Byrne has kind of like destroyed a lot of his own reputation, sadly. But I wanted the story not to be about just lambasting Byrne. I
Right.
wanted the story to show you, like, the story is supposed to be 2/3 of like the wide-eyed wonder of why this was a great story, why this series was a great series. And then at the end of the story, be like, oh, and by the way, this guy's really said some terrible things that he's never apologized for. So it's mostly about the glory of the 80s when he was not destroying, himself reputationally. And then, by the way, just so you know, there's this other stuff. But it's mostly a love letter to like that spirit of Marvel in the 80s.
Yeah, no, I
And
mean, like I said, it was cool because I learned some stuff that I still didn't know, in terms of like the team and the popularity of the book and stuff like that. I've just it because I actually just listened to Rob Liefeld's not that long ago. He did a podcast of
oh, okay.
Byrne versus everybody, basically. Like it was comic
Okay.
book feuds, and he was
Yes.
but he reads from actual interviews, and
Uh,
just listening to like the delusion sometimes of what he's saying about other creators, or saying how
meaning
like
meaning Burn. Meaning Burn.
John Byrne, yeah, and I'm just like, man, dude, like it just comes off as bitter, you know,
Yep.
and also
Yep.
obviously ego is a little bit of. I think he compared it to like when somebody's at the top of this, like a sport, like an athlete, they're at the top,
Yes.
right? Like a LeBron James, even though LeBron
Yes.
has not faltered at all, he's kind of
No,
stayed
correct.
where he's
Correct.
at. But it would be like somebody that's at that level, Carmelo Anthony. I'll
Right.
use him for an example because I think that he was like, obviously he's one of the best players in the league for a long time, but then your skills start to waver and you're not, but you
Right.
don't want to take that reserve role. So I think he was kind of comparing Byrne to that. And then he also did it with Barry Windsor Smith. And it's just like, it's so interesting to see these creators like go from like where they are, like at the top of their game, and they can't just
Yeah.
accept that, like, okay, like there's new talent, like, oh, they're good. You don't have to bash them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Why
Like
do you
you
have
can,
to trash? Why do you have to trash talk everyone?
right. You know, like it's weird to me because like I've met a lot of met and talked to a lot of creators, and I don't feel that I've never, you know, Mark Wade's been in the game for a long time, dude. Like, you know,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
he
No,
doesn't
he's
seem
a
bitter.
class act.
You
No,
know,
it's and he also did you see he recently did a whole post about like he kind of was basically subtly saying all you bitter creators out there who feel that everyone has left you in the dust, you might need to polish up your own toolkit. Is your stuff in current trends or do you need to work on your material to keep with the way the industry is now? And he said it pretty politely.
I
No,
agree.
Mark Wade has always been
Yeah. But that's like
pretty,
to me, that's a perfect example of like
yeah,
a creator that's been in the game for fucking decades, decades.
yeah,
But he, you know, like
yeah,
you change it, or it's like a band, you know, like they're like my favorite band is Incubus. I feel like they're constantly evolving. Their sound
right.
constantly evolves from where they started. Yeah. So it's like, but some bands can't, and those are the ones
Yeah.
that fall to the wayside. Like you gotta evolve, you gotta change, you gotta be willing to adapt. But
And
yeah,
even like John Lennon of the Beatles used to trash talk when he was very young. When he was very young, and as he got older, he said, "Oh, I was being an asshole." He said, "I thought once you were a successful musician, part of the role you had to play was to be the edgy jerk who trash talks everyone." And he, as the years went on, he was like, "That was just my immaturity. I was just being a dick, and there was no reason to be trash talking." You know,
but yeah,
Burn has like dug his own metaphorical grave in that
yeah,
respect.
he definitely has. But that, you know, like I keep saying though, like the varying stories that you get in this book, it really gives the full breadth of like what you are capable of, both as a
Thank you.
creator and
Thank
like
you.
your interest. I mean, you have a story about the McRib, you know, for fuck's sake, you know, like
which 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 the New York Times
yeah,
published. And
yeah. I mean, it's
I could
awesome.
not believe they said yes when I pitched that.
Yeah, that's
I
crazy,
couldn't
dude.
believe it. I was like, they're never going to take this. But I'm doing the story. Almost every story in that book, and this is, I just want to say to any like comics creators who are out there who might be watching this, almost every story in that book, like a lot of other artists obviously do this. Almost every story in that book is a passion project that whether someone took notice or not, I was going to make that story because I wanted to make the story. You know, it's like filmmakers who I'm going to make this movie. And if the audience loves it or accepts it or denies it or doesn't care, I'm still making the movie. So that's kind of how I've always approached it. Also, because look, I'm an indie guy. At the moment, I'm not looking to, you know, be at Marvel or DC, or I just want to make my passion project stories. So every one of those stories is a story that I was going to do, whether anyone noticed or not. And then it would be a web comic on some site, big or small, and you could read it on the website for free. And maybe you gave a shit and maybe you didn't. But for me, that's where I found the most joy is making stories that I truly wanted to make and then finding a home for them after the fact.
I love that.
And then
Yeah,
the New York Times, like the fact that they took that story, I couldn't believe it.
yeah.
It's so
How did that
silly.
happen?
Well, once I did the first New York Times story about the ice cream,
Mm-hmm.
it's called the Tartufo. It's an Italian ice cream that's
Right.
found at like old school Italian restaurants. Now I had a relationship with the food department of the New York Times, and they were like, "What other stories do you have? Pitch us." Almost like a journalist, right? I had to pitch stories to the editor, or like a writer at Marvel or DC has to pitch stories to editors. And I was like, I never thought they would be like, give us more comics about food and weird random food shit. So I was like, let me come up with some pitches. And I did one. I did a second one, which is about pigeon when pigeon is served at
Yeah,
fancy restaurants as a dinner.
yeah. That was an
Squab, it's
interesting one
called.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, but the key to that was something that you typically would never hear about. Like a lot of people you read that story and they're like, I never even heard of this thing. So
Same.
at least they come away learning something. And then for the third one, I was going to do the McRib. I was just going to do that as a website, on a friend's website. I was like, I'll put this anywhere. I just want to do this story. It's so silly But obviously there are a lot of people obsessed with the McRib out there. I was one of them. I am one of them. It turned out it had an interesting history. There were some interesting things to tell the public about it. And there have been a lot of articles, like prose articles, but no one had ever done a comic about the McRib, as far as I saw. And I was like, well, a lot of these things are like, at least I'll be the first idiot to do a comic about Jason Todd's death. Or at least I'll be the first guy to do a comic about what it felt like to be reading Alpha Flight. I'll be the first guy to do a comic about the McRib, right? You've read an article about the McRib probably at some point, but this is going to be the first comic, and I'm going to summarize everything that I think you need to know about the history, about my life, funny stories from it. You know what I mean? Like, I try to almost think of it like a journalist. Like, I want you to walk away having learned something and having a little tour through my brain, kind of a thing. And so I sent that to the New York Times. I'm like, well, this is a story. I'm doing it already. Whether you want it or not is up to you. And they said yes. And I was like, I still think I felt like I'd entered an alternate dimension. I was like, when the New York Times says yes to a comic about the McRib, like, is this the Twilight Zone? Like, what is going on? So that's a really great feeling when you pitch like a really weird idea and someone in power says yes. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I would never think they would say yes to something like that.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
I thought anything about the McRib and the McDonald's, I just thought it would be too lowbrow for the New York Times, because the New York Times, we have this image that it's fancy and snooty, and especially the food department, the food section. But
yeah, for sure.
There was a story there. What'd you say?
I said, yeah, for sure. Definitely. I would think, like you said, too lowbrow for that. But I mean, I think that is a hilarious thing to. I didn't know the McRib. I think I didn't discover the McRib probably till you said the Flintstones during the movie, and I also didn't know that it was brought back for that. But that I remember when that movie came out, and I was like, I've never had a McRib. I had no desire to have it, but I do know that people are obsessed with that fucking sandwich.
Yes.
How do you? I wanted to ask though, because like I said, all the stories are so different from one another. There's no two stories that I would say are like, obviously the food ones you can group together. Obviously the green point of view you can group together. But how do you decide what you are going to do? Is it just like a thought comes to mind and you're like, okay, I want to do this? Or do you ever like sit down and they're like, where you're like, what am I going to do? I need to do something. I don't know what. And then you just sit there and think about it until a thought comes or an idea comes. I mean,
some of them, it's funny. So for many, many years, I basically, and I say this in the introduction, I didn't think I was really a writer. I didn't think of myself as a writer. I'm like, I write essays, but I'm not like Kevin Smith. Like, I don't come up with characters and snappy dialogue very often. And I don't come up with plots. And for so long, I thought, that's the only way you can be a writer is if you come up with plots and plot twists and great characters. And then a lifetime of reading autobio, I was like, oh, you can do stories that are mostly autobio with a little bit of essay like mixed in there. And then, so anyway, I did all the Brooklyn stories. Then I was like, ooh, I want to do stories about being a comics fan. And then part of my goal there was, I want, like the Batman story or the Alpha Flight, I want them to be digestible for someone who doesn't give a shit about comics. Like, almost like, and I thought of it like a documentary in comics form, taking you through, whether you're a Batman fan or not, whether you never read a comic in your life, you should be able to read the Alpha Flight and the Batman, and it should feel like a documentary, but it's a comic, right? There's still a point of view, but there's also information, and you're learning about the world. It would be like if I sat and watched a documentary about the trends in the heavy metal industry, an industry I don't know very much about, right? A good documentary would show me what was cool, why it was cool, and where the world was going in that field. And then I stumbled onto the food stuff. So then it was like, okay, I have to come up with pitches for weird comics about food. And the same thing when I did those 4 comics for the New York Times, they should have little Easter eggs, or they should have little stylistic things where if you're a comics fan, you'll be like, oh, he did this effect here. But if you don't care about comics, it should still function almost as an article, as a piece of journalism, kind of. You know, I always wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to be a voiceover guy, which I still do a little bit now. But I also secretly always wanted to be a journalist. And so this is like the way to do that through the back end. And I also always wanted to be like in advertising. And so when I work on the book design for this book with Eli, or I do the marketing, it's like that's my advertising fantasy getting played out of, okay, how do we market this, and how do I present it, and what's the way you hook people? So one of the joys of my life so far at age 51 is like I get to kind of do all these back end jobs, you know, through these different things. And when I get to do acting jobs in film and TV, I also get to be these other kind of people. The other thing is that I read during the pandemic, I became aware of the work of there's a guy named Noah Van Sciver.
Yeah.
If you know who he is.
Yeah.
And there's another indie cartoonist, partly mostly autobio, named John Porcellino.
Yep.
I started reading a lot of Noah Van Sciver and John Porcellino, and their stuff was a different like subgenre. It was autobio, but it had like a certain format, and sometimes they were very simple, but deceptively simple. So then I thought, all right, now like the restraints are off. Now I can do a comic about anything. Like I've shown that you can do a comic about the McRib. You can do a comic about being a comics fan. You can do typical autobio stuff. Now you can just do any freaking comic about anything you want. Like Noah Van Sciver did a comic about going to tiny comic conventions and like trying to make $5 selling his mini comic. Or he did a comic about going to stores and just being like, here, take my free mini comic. I'm not even asking you to pay me. Just please give it away so that people read this.
Yeah.
And so then I started doing comics about whatever weird shit would enter my mind that I thought would make for a good comic. So then there's a whole section in the book of all, and I would try to challenge myself to make them 1 or 2 page short stories, sometimes 3 or 4, right? And so, and then, and I still right now, I have some ideas that have been percolating in my head for other short stories, topics that I've never seen anyone cover. And I just don't have enough free time in my life yet to drew them, but I've already got them like laid out in my head. So I'm really excited. But when I want to do a short story about when cell phones first came out. Some of my friends had beepers, like actors who did the beeper,
I remember
like,
the
to find
beeper.
out about an audition. I was like, I don't need a beeper. And I thought to myself, like, I don't need a cell phone. Like, there's no way I need a cell phone. And I passed Patrick Stewart on the streets of Manhattan, and he was on the phone like, well, yes, whatever. And I thought, you know who needs a cell phone? Fucking Patrick Stewart. That guy needs a cell phone. He's got movie deals to negotiate. But at the very dawn of cell phones, I like had a funny I had like attitude about it. I'm like, I don't need a cell phone. Fuck this bullshit. Like I was sort of like that old man who's like, I don't need what the kids have, this new technology. But I was like that when I was like 29.
I want to read that comic. You need to do that one.
And I'm gonna draw, like, a lot of people have forgotten. People joke about flip phones and stuff, but the brick in the movies, you know, the cell phone that looks like
the Zach Morris phone.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
But I have things to say about that. I kind of want to like humorously remind people of certain things about the very early days of cell phones that in the context, again, if I just said, hey, remember when cell phones look like this, that wouldn't be an interesting story. But in the context of like what I was thinking, I was very like, I had a lot of attitude about cell phones, and I was like, I don't need one, you know, and part of it was like being a frustrated actor. I was like, I'm not getting enough auditions to need a cell phone. Fuck that. You know, it was like kind of like until my phone's ringing off the hook, I don't need to be available to people. And there's a whole lot of feelings and stuff I want to get in. And that'll just be a random 4-page story. And I'll get to draw Patrick Stewart on Fifth Avenue on the phone. You know, so I don't know. I have a bunch of, I did a comic, which is actually not included in the book. It was Halloween. And people are like, cobwebs, you put up cobwebs in your apartment. And one day I was like, cobwebs, why are they called cobwebs? And I'm very interested in like word origins, because cob web, obviously it's a web, but cobwebs, what the hell is that? So I researched it, and I was like, this is a story. And so I did a 2-page comic story about the very obscure Old English derivation etymology of why a cobweb is called a cobweb. Because I'd been alive a long time, and I have no idea why it's called a cobweb. So, and it actually, I mean, people may like it or not like it, but I was proud of it, and it got some play on social media or whatever, and a website picked it up, and it's like a funny, silly, but you also come away from it having learned all this history.
Why is it called the cobweb?
Because in Old English, like the Canterbury Tales, going back to like the 1300s, there's in Danish, the word for spider is atterkop, like COPPE. Like a lot of English is derived from other languages, right? There's Spanish, there's French words. So the Danish word for spider, being atterkop, bled into English, and suddenly cop became spider. So instead of spider web, they would say cobweb. But there's also another thing about how cob also means corn on the cob. And there's a weird thing there, all of which I draw in the story. So there's like a weird, it goes through like a tunnel of like spider, but also corn on the cob. But it eventually lands. This is, I believe the story hopefully lands. So I released that at Halloween, and I think that's helped. Like that's why it went a little viral or whatever. But sorry, you were going to say.
Oh, I was going to ask you. So you said it's not in here. How many more stories are not included in this book that you have?
So there's funny. I thought I was including every story, but I've done the other secret, by the way. I think you should start writing short stories if you want, and just find people to draw them. You know what I mean? Like that might be easier. I've done so many short stories. I thought I was including all of them in this, but there's 2 or 3 that aren't in this book. One of them is in Wizard #2, which Eli published with Cosmic Lion. And I thought we put it in, and then you do it. The book is 220 pages, so it's a lot. And I went through it so obsessively with Eli for months as we designed it together. And then I was like, oh shit, there's a 2-page story about me watching the Batman animated series. And one episode was so cool. Remember when they used to actually air on Saturday morning?
Yep.
I mean, this is going back.
I know. Ways. Yeah, I remember when it first started. Yeah.
And I had a roommate in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, and I woke him up on a Saturday morning because he was sleeping like a person should be sleeping. And I was up at 10 a.m. watching it on the Kids WB, like the New York Warner Brothers fucking station. And it was the episode Over the Edge, where like half the people die. It turns out to be a dream, of course, but half the people die. Batman's identity is revealed to the world. Commissioner Gordon's like, you betrayed me. I can't believe you. You got my daughter killed because his daughter's Batgirl.
Right.
And I literally was like, holy shit. Oh my God. Wow. Oh my God. And I was making all this noise at 10 a.m. And I woke my roommate up, and he came out and it was like, can you be quiet? Like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, oh my God, he's right. This is crazy. I'm like having this reaction to this Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Batman animated, because the episode was so good and it was so shocking. And I couldn't believe that the Kids WB like censors had approved it. Mm-hmm. So I did a story about that. I did a story about what it's like waking up my roommate because I was too into the Batman animated series. And because he goes back in his bedroom, and I thought, I wonder, am I the only person in America who woke up their roommate on a Saturday morning because of the Batman animated series? Like, it's very random, but so that's in Wizard. So now that is exclusive to Wizard #2 until it, isn't. And then the story about cobwebs is not in the book.
Right.
But these are each like 2-page stories. I would say like 90% of everything I've done is in the book. So I was okay. I also did a story in high school about being excited to go watch the very first Tim Burton Batman. I did a comic like 3 weeks before Batman 89 opened about how excited I was to see Batman 89, and they printed it in my high school paper.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I almost included it here in this book, but I was like, it might be too deep cuts. I mean, there's already a back matter with a lot of like high school sketchbook art and stuff. So one of my concepts with this was the first 3 quarters of this paperback is comics, but the final quarter is like a mini art book built in, like a back matter.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was that like? I mean, for you, kind of reading it, or
I enjoyed it all. I love the chapter breaks too, the in between where like you kind of explain what we're about to like, yeah, like here, right? For instance, how you explain like the chat, like I
oh,
enjoyed
thank
that.
you.
I
Yeah,
like that you did that you added that in. Yeah, I love the back matter. I love the different. I mean, I didn't know it went back. I didn't pay attention to the year you signed it, but yeah, I mean, like that's 95. It says like just like this one, right? Like I yeah,
oh
I
yeah,
I really dug getting all the back matter. I love that about books. I kind of get mad when I don't have back matter in a book.
yeah. I kind of missed it. Like for a while, the back matter was a trend and a good trend, and
Mm.
now it seems like you don't get all that much back matter anymore in books.
No, I feel like a lot of the time. I mean, there's even times when they like DC, for instance, I'll say like we'll put out like a hardcover,
Right,
a
the
deluxe,
collection.
and there's nothing, and I'm like,
Yeah,
what's deluxe about it? Like,
yeah,
you
right,
literally just printed the story,
right.
and maybe you give me a couple of the other covers. Like,
Yes,
no, like I'm not going to spend all that money on that. But no, I
right.
think you did a great job. I think that I kind of wanted to ask, as we wind down, how
Yeah,
did
sure.
you connect with Eli? How did this
Yes,
connection happen?
yes. So Eli has been so great. I'm a Cosmic Lion believer through and through. Eli was actually connected through Ben Granoff or Granoff. I always forget exactly how to pronounce. Do you know Ben or know of
Yeah,
him?
I'm familiar with that. Yeah, we've interviewed him for the channel too before.
So I know Ben. I guess just through the years. I guess I just met him consistently at conventions, comics conventions. There was also I Bendis. Bendis used to, when Bendis was with Image Comics initially, doing Powers. He had a message board, another message board back in the early days on the Image website.
Okay.
Um, and so it was called the Bendis board. And there were a lot of guys on there. And I think I met Ben through a guy named Sal Cipriano or Cipriano. And
That name sounds
Sal
familiar.
was a comics creator, still is. Now he's a letterer for Marvel, DC, and many companies. So Sal invited me to a party. Like we were like message board friends. It's kind of like being Twitter friends and then meeting a friend in real life or meeting a friend through Instagram or something. And he invited me to some parties, and I went to those, and all his friends were super nice. And I met Ben eventually through Sal, and then Ben invited me to a drink and draw group. Like I think a year or two after like the drink and draw concept started to exist,
Right.
and I was like, oh, I want to go and hang out and draw with people. And if it's in a bar, that's great. Let's do it. So I drew for a while at these drink and draw groups with Ben and some other artists. One of Ben's friends named Dove Torben, who's done some comics, and a guy named Anthony Picone. And that kind of like helped jumpstart me a little bit to drawing for fun again. Because this was like at the time of my life where I was like, I'm an actor. I have to audition a million times, and I can't really do comics because I'm focused on acting. And they kind of like going to those drink and draw meetups. Kind of was like, oh yeah, it's fun to draw. I like drawing. Like, why am I not doing this for fun? Right? I knew Ben through the years, and eventually I became aware that Ben was doing stuff with Eli, his podcast about Grendel, and I think I'd also seen the cartoon kayfabe community, right? So it's like I knew Eli through Ben, but then I also started to learn more about Eli through the cartoonist kayfabe community,
Right.
um, where Eli was very very prominent. I think he started that group, right? Essentially.
Somebody else, I think they had the
Oh, he
idea at
took
the
it
same
over.
time, but he kind of took it over, yeah, because the other person that had started it, like I from what Eli told me, like that person started it, but he had already kind of thought about doing it, and then they just did it
Right.
together, and then he ended up running it by himself, or
Right.
and then other people have become admins and stuff. But yeah,
Yes. So then I kind of like I was aware of Eli's stuff through Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats. And then I saw that he was publishing books, but this is kind of years ago, right? So he was publishing the Ween Zine and his comic, Elonia and Monkey Lion, and then he started the Grendel thing. And then I learned about other projects like the Wolverine Weapon Ek
yeah,
project, which wasn't Eli, but
no,
Eli and Ben were involved. And I
mhm.
did pieces for that aren't in one of them is in the book, but I did several pages for that. And then like the whole like kayfabe, like, hey, let's do a Batman year one book, or let's do a Wolverine Barry Windsor Smith book. I was like, oh, this is fun. Like again, just passion project fun. Then I saw they did Wizard #1. I'm pronouncing it Wizard. And I was like, ooh, that I was kind of watching it from afar, and I was like, ooh, that looks like fun. So I bought Wizard #1, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And Eli's publishing is like getting more and more sophisticated and getting bigger and inviting more people to the party, kind of a thing. So then I wrote to Eli a year ago, and I was like, can I be in Wizard #2? I really want to be in Wizard #2 if you're doing it. And he was like, yeah, yeah, sure, man. So we put together my pages through Wizard #2, and working with Eli on that, he was just so awesome. And I was like, ooh, he's really cool. And I just always kept my eye on Eli, probably for like 3 or 4 years. It didn't even occur to me at first that he could be someone to publish this. I was pitching it to Fantagraphics and all these other companies that
Mhm.
just rejected me or ignored me. I found weird oddball publishing companies that dabbled in comics. I'm like, do you want to publish my collection, short stories? And they all politely said no or ignored me. And it was a guy, I guess some part of me was like, maybe I could try this with Eli, but I was almost like afraid to ask, or I don't know. It just was a vague idea in my head. And a newer friend through kayfabe named Adam Lemna, who
Right,
probably,
yeah, yeah,
he was like, hey, I think he was he was like, hey, what about Eli for this book that you are envisioning? And I was like, it had only been like, I hadn't really ever said out loud, like maybe Eli. And then when Adam said, what about Eli? Like, I'm talking you up to Eli and saying, maybe he should look at your thing. Once Adam said that, I was like, oh, like maybe the fact that someone else had thought of me for Eli,
yeah,
and it wasn't just like a vague concept in my head that I hadn't said to anyone, was like maybe that's like a sign, maybe there is something there. And so we started to talk about it, and so that's a long story answer, but so it is funny though, like it's several people, right? Sal Cipriano,
hmm,
Ben, Eli, the kayfabe community entity, the kayfabe ringside seats, like a lot of me being aware of all you guys was because of Weapon Ek and the Wizard and even Grand Design, which I was not involved in. The image, fan design, grand design.
hmm,
I wasn't in those, but I was watching from afar. I was like, ooh, these guys are doing something really cool here. Like I was watching, like, ooh, I like what they're cooking over there in that corner of
yeah.
the Facebook world. And it kind of like, set my mind like, ooh, maybe I want to join that party. That looks like they're having a lot of fun over there.
Yeah, no,
So
it's definitely a great community.
yes.
Yeah, I met Eli through the shop I work at,
Okay.
because I remember, like, because I used to do the polls when I first started, and I saw that he got Ninja Turtles, but he wanted the Eastman covers, and I was like, who is this dude? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm a huge turtle head, and I only get the Eastman covers. Like I always go for that cover. So like we started talking about that, and then somehow my website came up, and then he was doing Wizard #1, and he's like, well, I know you edit like your stuff on your site, like would you be interested in like maybe taking a look at it, help me edit? I'm like, yeah, all right, sure. And that's how I discovered the kayfabe channel. Like I didn't even know about cartoonist
Okay.
kayfabe. and then he
Okay.
added me to the group, and that was 2019.
Wow.
And
Yes.
yeah, and from there it's just like, yeah, all the friendships I've built through this,
Yeah.
like the people I've met, and some I talk to more than others, obviously, but
Yeah.
it is a really great community. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have known about you, if it wasn't for the group. And like I told you, I really dig your stuff. And everybody, all the creativity that comes from that group, it's inspiring,
There's so
motivating.
many great artists and writers. And as many people like Rocco Jerome have talked about, the pandemic really kind of solidified a lot of that, right? Because the pandemic happened and it was like, wow, we're all at home. What can we make? What can we do? Who can we connect with? And I think it seemed to be the community strengthened with that, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
seems like from the
definitely,
outside.
definitely strengthened with that. Yeah, it's like I said, it's amazing, and all the stuff, all the books that come out of there, like I can comfortably say that, like because of the group, like I've always wanted to work in comics, but I don't really have the desire to work for like a big publisher. I just want to do my own thing or work
Yeah.
with,
Yes.
the indie. Like I'm cool not working for Marvel or DC. It's not those aren't my goals.
Yes.
Like if I can work with Cosmic Lion, and like that's the only comic book publisher I work with, I'd be happy. Or even
And
self-publishing my
yeah.
stuff. Like getting my own
Yeah.
stuff out there, like you said. Finding an artist to draw the stories that I want to write. But
Yeah,
everything
man.
is
Dude, if you write a 2 or 3 page story, I would volunteer. I'm doing it live on your channel.
all
I
right.
would draw it.
I'll hold you to it.
Yeah, man. There's a writer from the New York Times, a journalist, the guy who really got me in. I've bugged him for years. He was like, I kind of want to write stories. He wants to write autobio about his life as a journalist because he mostly reports on comics. He's done like 700 stories,
Oh
700
wow.
articles about comics. He's like their guy for comics. And I was like, you got to have a lot of funny stories and anecdotes. So finally, after years of like cajoling him, he's writing a bunch of short stories. And he's doling them out to different artists because he knows tons of amazing artists, of course. And there's a story. He told me all the plots. And I said, I want that story, please. Please let me draw this one story. And I'm drawing it now. I'm on page 4 out of 7. And it's about how something big in his life was positively affected. A major area of growth and change for him was affected because of friendships he made through letter columns, old school letter columns
That's
in the
awesome.
80s, in the early 80s.
That's dope.
And I actually, just to show you for fun, I know
Yes.
we probably have to wind up. I brought some pages here just because I was like, ooh, what's visual? So this is a little sneak peek. So this is we're doing a story about him doing letter columns, like comic book letter columns, and it's called I Was a Teenage Letter Hack.
I like that title. That's dope.
And it involves him
Oh, I
right
have that comic. I have that.
in
I have that
oh
too.
yeah, Teen
Yeah.
Titans. This Teen
Yeah.
Titans issue.
Yeah.
There's a right with thunder and lightning on the
Yeah.
cover.
Yeah. It's
So
good
that's
recreation of that cover. Did you do a good job on that?
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's fun. So this is another page. We talk about the origins of letter columns in old sci-fi magazines. Ray Bradbury used to write into letter columns of old sci-fi magazines, and that's how he started to get writing gigs, because he would write into like sci-fi magazines and stuff. We have old pictures of I drew the young versions of Kurt Busiek, Paul Levitz, and Roy Thomas.
Nice.
Rob Liefeld drew the cover of a Titans fanzine before he was working for Marvel. And this is a reproduction of that cover.
That's awesome.
So then one thing, I'm drawing like a montage of old cheesy letter column titles. My favorite is Let's Yap with Cap.
Yeah, I like that too. That was a real letter column title.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Let's Level with Daredevil. That was a real one.
Wow.
Socket to Shellhead.
Fleet Sheet
for the Flash. Anyway, and I just finished drawing. I'm gonna mail this for Adam Lemna, who's about to do his Relic Hunter. I just finished drawing this Frank Frazetta kind of homage thing. for
I'm a huge Frazetta head. So
oh my gosh, she's amazing. I
yeah,
mean, this is I am but a poor imitator, of course, but it was fun. He was like, "What if you did a Frazetta homage?" And I was like, "Oh!" So I just went through all the Frazetta covers and paintings, and I was like, "Okay, I picked one that I thought, it's always fun to draw pretty girls."
yeah, no, I like that cover, dude. It's dope.
So Adam is about to do a collection of his Relic Hunter series, which Eli is publishing, and mine is only one of, I think, 10 pinups. He got 10 artists to do pinups at the end. Some of them are like really, really amazing indie artists. So I'm excited to see what he puts together with that. And I got Bill Sienkiewicz to give me a quote for my book. So I was like on the moon about that.
How'd you do that? I cannot get a hold of that, dude. I've been trying to like get in touch with him for 3-4 years now. Like I tried to reach out to him. How'd you get that quote?
Um, I saw him over the years through the conventions.
Nice.
Even years before I ever thought I would. I didn't really think I would be drawing comics, right? In my 20s and 30s, I was a fan. I was a fan only. And I would see him at conventions and just talked with him. And I would try not to talk with him too long because I knew there were a lot of people online or behind me or whatever. And then I just kept seeing him. And once I started making comics, I think I tagged him on Twitter with my Batman comic.
Okay.
Because that was the web comic at Bleeding Cool. All these, my strategy, by the way, if you do if you do short stories, my strategy, it didn't make me money, but it got me exposure. I made them all web comics for free. So I would send them to websites, not ask for money, but I would send them to websites that I hope people would, websites with a pretty decent audience or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that Batman comic about Jason Todd was reprinted in Bleeding Cool in full. So I just sent the link to, I think like Jim Lee retweeted it at one point, because it was about Batman. So it was sort of hopefully a no-brainer, like, hey, here's the only guy who spent months of his life making a comic about what it was like to vote for Jason Todd to die. Like, that's, at least I'll read it, right? I felt like I had a pretty good shot at least getting them to read it. And then a bunch of them retweeted it, and Bill Sienkiewicz was one of them. This is back in like 2017 or something.
Oh wow.
So I just, over the many years, I would see him at conventions, or once in a while I would tag him on Twitter with a new web comic I had, and he would read some of them. And eventually he stopped me at a convention and was like, I really like the stuff you're doing. I felt like Martin Scorsese came over and was like, you're a good actor, man. Like, we kind of developed, we're obviously not very close, but we kind of developed enough of an acquaintanceship that over the years, eventually he started following me on social media. And then eventually I was like, I think I'm gonna like ask him. And I almost felt like a little nervous about doing it. And I became friends also through Dan Haspiel with Rick Parker, who was a letterer for Marvel. He drew the Beavis and Butthead comic for Marvel. And he's got a book of his own that's coming out next year, which he wrote and drew, which is, I think, going to be pretty amazing, with Abrams books, because Abrams is doing a lot more graphic novels now.
Mm-hmm.
Abrams is the ones that published the Alex Ross Fantastic Four book recently.
Yeah, that was an awesome book.
So Rick Parker was like, dude, you're 50 years old. Ask Bill Sienkiewicz. Like, what do you have to lose? Like, ask him. The worst he can do is say a polite no. You have to swing for the fences. You have to ask these people, like, don't be afraid because he's amazing. Just ask. So I asked, and he said yes, and I was pleasantly stunned.
As we wrap up, I just want to, thank you again for taking time to chat with me. I always love talking comics, always love talking with, indie cartoonists such as yourself. I like being able to bring people like yourself, or like Marty Keene, who, like, the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel actually made his name blow up a little bit recently. Yes. It's bringing eyes to people that the comic fans don't know it. And I really do appreciate when, you guys like yourself take time to chat with me. I really do.
Thank you.
And before we leave, is there anything else that you're working on that you can kind of plug?
So, I am working on that story for the George Gustinis is his name, or George Gustines. The correct pronunciation, of course, is George Gustines, but he often says Gustines, so I'll say Gustines. So George Gustines is writing this. This is, it's also, he's kind of doing the same thing. He's going to do a bunch of short stories, different artists for each story, and try to find a publisher after the fact. You know what I mean? Like, he's got one drawn already by a great artist named Bill Walco,
Oh, I know
who's
Bill
done
Walker.
stuff for Archie, and you know
Yeah.
Bill. So he's already drawn a story for George, and I think that was on the New York Times website, because George has the connections at the Times. That was about like George's process of writing an article, about comics for the paper. He's going to get 2 or 3 stories drawn and then like shop it around to publishers. So I'm working on that story. And then, most important thing to me is to get that story done so that that's a weapon in his arsenal to try to find a home for it. I have a couple of other short stories I'm doing that are just again, weird. I'm doing a short story about playing with Star Wars toys as a kid, and it's an anecdote from my childhood about the Death Star playset, the Kenner 1980 Death Star playset. So that's all I'll say about that. But I'm like, I've never seen a comic about the Death Star playset before, and I have a funny story from childhood that's just kind of a cute, thing. There's a bunch of other childhood anecdotes I have, or other anecdotes that aren't about childhood that I have on a list. I still have more Greenpoint stories I want to do.
Okay.
And I still have at least 2 other stories about being a comics fan. And one of them, I'm so excited about one of them, but I can't say what it is because I feel like someone might do it
Yeah, don't say
if
it.
I
Don't
say
say
it.
it. Yeah, don't say it.
I don't know. But there's a comic. I mean, this thing that I want to write about, it has been occasionally written about before on like small blogs, but no one's ever given it the treatment that I want to give it. So, and I'm doing the pinup for Adam. I'm also going to do a pinup for Ghost Agents, for Rocco Jerome's book Ghost Agents. We picked a pinup that I'm going to do for later this year, and that's kind of it. I mean, the main thrust for me is this book, marketing this book. A lot of people bought signed and sketched copies, so I'm still like, I want to give people a good drawing. I don't just want to like doodle a smiley face and be like, here's your drawing.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to give people a quality illustration in their book. Yeah, I'm also hustling the book to stores. You know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
You're an indie creator, you go to different stores. Hey, will you carry this? You schmooze them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still acting and auditioning. I just auditioned for a Super Bowl commercial a month ago, did not get it, but even to audition for a real Super Bowl commercial with a big casting director, I'm thrilled to at least get the audition. I had a callback for a small part on Sex and the City with Sarah Jessica Parker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting to hear if I got that, so we'll see. So anyway, I'm always trying to hustle, man. I'm always trying to hustle, but I would like more time at the drawing board. So it's but I have a day job, as a lot
As
of us
all of
do.
us do, yeah, for sure. Well, I look forward to
Yeah.
everything you're gonna put out, man. I'm really, really stoked to have discovered your work. Shout out to
Thank you.
Eli for publishing the book. Wish you
It's
nothing but the
thanks to Eli
yeah.
it's thanks to Eli that a lot of other people will see stuff.
Yeah, and I'll get all your social media links. I don't need to ask you to like say it out loud. I'll get all those links. I'll drop them down below. I'll drop the link to Cosmic Lion where you guys can buy the book if you don't already have it. And once again, I just want to say thank you, and we'll do this again in the future sometime.
Thanks, definitely. Maybe in a couple of years I'll have another collection, or in a couple of years we'll have that book by the New York Times guy of all different artists drawing his life anecdotes. The other quick thing I wanted to mention, there is a reason I'm sitting on the floor in my living room. I'm sitting on the floor because we have a dog. We have a chocolate lab puppy, and usually she's sleeping like a cat right now. Usually my wife is away for the weekend on a girls trip. So usually around this time, the dog like wants to come up and do things or whatever. And so usually the dog is a little more settled if I'm like on the floor next to her. So I thought if I sat on a real chair, the dog would be like jumping during the interview and such. So, but to my shock, our dog Daisy has not, she has not tried to, jump around or whatever. So maybe because I'm on the floor. But anyway, that's why I'm sitting on the floor in the living room.
I figured there was a good reason. All right. Well, thank
Yes.
you again, man, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And you're a great, very positive presence of good energy in the comics world.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man.